Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would review this little video and talk about this subject that I thought would be very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video that I believe is going to be by the channel FightHype.com, which, of course, is a YouTube channel that, of course, usually has a lot of great interviews and great little insights from either boxers or fighters, or sometimes MMA fighters, I believe, or boxing coaches, whatever it may be. But I thought that this video was very particularly interesting. Of course, for those of you that do not know, within the next up and coming couple of weeks, it's going to be a very interesting couple of weeks for us, quote unquote, fight fans or people that really like the fight game. Of course, next week is going to be Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr., I believe, on a Saturday on April 26th. I believe that is going to be on a Saturday. And of course, that's going to be a very intriguing fight because they have a little bit of blood boiling between them. And not only that, of course, but their fathers, Chris Eubank Sr. and of course Nigel Benn, of course, were two of the greater UK or British fighters of all time. And at once upon a time, I believe that they had fought as well. So it's going to be very interesting. There's going to be a certain amount of promotion behind that. But of course, in the first part of May, I believe May 2nd, and this is going to be on a Friday, I believe it is anyway. There's, of course, going to be that main triple header with Ryan Garcia and Rolly Romero, Devin Haney and Jose Ramirez, and Teofimo Lopez and Arnold Barbosa Jr. The day after that, on a Saturday, I believe on May 3rd, is going to be Canelo Alvarez versus William Skull for the complete undisputed title of the 168-pound weight class. And then the day after that is going to be Inoue, I believe, versus his opponent. I believe, his return to the USA in a very, very long time. And then Inoue, more than likely after that, if of course, assuming he wins that fight, says that he more than likely will plan to fight either MJ at 122 pounds, I believe, or Nick Ball at 126. So it's going to be very interesting. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because the triple header with Haney, Teofimo Lopez, and Ryan Garcia, of course, it's attracting a certain amount of attention. I think that it's a very, very good card. And there's a multitude of reasons why it's a very good card. Not only are they very entertaining fights when you talk about all the fights that were listed on there, but of course, assuming that, the favorites of these fights, whoever you have as the favorite for these fights, assuming that they all win, or assuming that the A sides, end up winning, their, career and their legacy is kind of tied to the other. Because of course these guys, have been promoted as, the quote unquote, elite four or, elite, whatever it was at 135 pounds. And of course now they kind of all dwell or realm around that 140-pound weight class. At least these three opponents do. But the question is, for a certain amount of people, is that who ends up having the hardest task on this fight card, or who ends up having that of the toughest matchup or the toughest fight? Well, there's a certain amount of fighters or a couple of fighters that I've now heard, or boxing analysts or certain people state that they believe that Devin the Dream Haney, that he will have the toughest matchup or the hardest matchup for himself on this fight card against that of a Jose Ramirez. And I just thought that I would kind of talk about it because there's a certain amount of people believe that Devin Haney, that he may very well potentially lose this fight, potentially get dropped multiple times like what he did against Ryan Garcia, or potentially lose the fight, potentially get knocked out. So I thought that I would talk about that. What are the chances that Devin Haney ends up losing this fight? And of course, this is going to be a video where it's an interview with Mr. Arnold Barbosa Jr., as you see pictured right there. And of course, he's fighting Teofimo Lopez as well. A fight that, of course, was an attractive option as soon as Teofimo moved up, but it didn't happen immediately. But of course, later on, Arnold Barbosa was still able to get some very decent wins, including over Jose Ramirez and Jack Catterall. And now we're all the way here. So it's going to be very interesting. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's see what Mr. Arnold Barbosa has to say. He's going to talk a little bit about his up-and-coming fight with Teofimo Lopez, as well as him personally predicting that he believes that Devin Haney is going to lose. But let's get into it. Let's see what he has to say, and I'm going to give my breakdown.
Did it excite you now that, starting, when the press conference kicks in, like, man, the boxing fans you're on that prime time card. You're with the elites. It's crazy, and there's Devin, there's Ryan, there's Rolly, there's Tio. Like, you belong in that stratosphere. Are you gonna watch that card as a fan as well, or are you gonna watch that as like, these are other guys that I also wanted?
No, man, I'm watching that as like as simply as like, hey, these are the guys that I want, So that's like I'm gonna watch it as like homework.
Mm-hmm.
So, so Like I'm excited, man. I'm honored. I'm humbled. Me and Tio got kind of put on this card a little late. I'm telling you, like it was probably like the week after my fight. Golden was like, May 2nd, will you be ready? I said, bro, of course I'll be ready. Like, look at my face. Nothing's happened to my face. Like, my body feels good. Like, of course. So, so Teal was right.
I'm going to be very interested to see what Arnold Barboza Jr. is going to do against Teofimo Lopez. Now, if you just had to ask me very early on who I personally believe is going to win the fight between Teofimo Lopez and Arnold Barboza Jr., and certain people may obviously pick Teofimo Lopez because, of course, he's going to be the favorite or the A side heading into this fight. But it's a little bit hard to tell with Teofimo Lopez because Teofimo Lopez, although he is very talented, he also has certain limitations within his style, especially offensively. And he's also not the most elite defensive fighter. But what Teofimo Lopez really prefers for you to do is that he really prefers for you to take charge. And that was shown, within a multitude of fights. And that's why he has a little bit of a problem with certain fighters that are a bit more defensive and force him to go forward and take the charge and kind of cut off the ring. We've seen him with Sandor Martin. We've seen him with Jermaine Ortiz and a certain amount of other fighters. And it was a debate to many people as to whether he really won the Sandor Martin fight, and of course also the Jermaine Ortiz fight. Now, I personally thought that he just had won the Sandor Martin fight, but I also thought that he personally lost the Jermaine Ortiz fight. I thought that, although of course Jermaine Ortiz, maybe he could have been a bit more offensive or impactful with his punches, I don't think that Teofimo Lopez did anywhere near enough to win that fight, just in my personal view. But maybe I'd have to rewatch it. I'm not sure. It's been a while. But the point being is this. Do I believe that Arnold Barboza will beat Teofimo Lopez? I don't personally think so. And the reason why I state that is because Arnold Barboza is not a guy that, in my view, will really fight the type of fight that is going to give Teofimo Lopez a lot of problems. I think he's going to give Teofimo Lopez a little bit too much of an opportunity to really throw on him. I think that there's going to be times to where he tries to push the fight, and I think that he's going to run sometimes into Teofimo Lopez's shots. And I think as the fight goes along, just in my personal view, I think that more than likely that he's going to throw less and less as the fight goes along. Now, I could be wrong about that because Arnold Barboza, of course, has pulled out some very good performances, or he's, dug down deep, to really beat some guys like, Jack Catterall in a very good fight. And, of course, he beat former champion Jose Ramirez, who, of course, is now fighting Devin Haney. But Teofimo Lopez is a different type of style. And as many people state, styles make fights. And Teofimo Lopez's power, what I'll personally state is this. Teofimo's level of power is none to joke around with. Teofimo is a guy that can punch just as hard as a welterweight. So when you talk about that level of power, I'm going to be very interested to see how Arnold Barboza handles that very early on. But we'll see.
Right there, and it was funny, man. It was cool. It was cool. I can't wait to see him in person. I can't wait. I can't wait for the presser, man. So stay tuned, man. We got a few pressers coming, and it's gonna be fun. Because my whole promoter's gonna be there. My new promoter's gonna be there. It's gonna be wild, bro. It's gonna be wild. It's gonna be wild.
I think is what's also wild and insane is that Devin's gonna fight a guy that you beat in this case. Mm-hmm. And at one point they were looking at if Ryan couldn't make the fight, that maybe you and Devin were gonna fight originally. And now the cards have been shuffled, and now he's facing Ramirez. And in this case, you guys took, pretty, what people opinion, I guess, lopsided losses. I know Devin's dealing with the situation where, Ryan has failed the drug test, so he got his O back, rightfully so. But, people have kind of been concerned about his ability to, go into another tough fight, because they see him took a beating. Does Ramirez pose that threat against Devin? Because you kind of beat him pretty one-sided.
Before Arnold Barboza ends up talking, if you're asking me personally, do I believe that Jose Ramirez, poses that much of a threat to Devin Haney? The answer for me is really no. And I know that a certain amount of people, they may disagree. They say, well, Jose Ramirez is a big individual. He's about as big as Devin Haney. He's a guy that's a former champion. He's big. He's powerful. That's great, but there's really nothing skill-wise, in my view, that Jose Ramirez beats Devin Haney in. Now, do I believe that Devin Haney is probably 100% the exact same fighter as what he was before that Ryan Garcia fight? No, of course, probably not. but I just don't know if Jose Ramirez has the type of style in order to really beat a Devin Haney. It's no offense against him, but I just seen Jose Ramirez in his last fight against this dude Arnold Barboza right here, and he pretty much thoroughly got outboxed throughout the whole entire time. Jose Ramirez is not a volume puncher. He's a guy that tries to kind of work in there. He doesn't have really exceptional head movement, nor does he have exceptional defense. He does have very good power and all that, but I just don't know if Jose Ramirez, I don't think that he's the type of style to beat Devin Haney. And he is the type of guy to where at times the more you throw, the more that at times, he kind of will, kind of bend down. And what I mean by bend down or, kind of acquiesce overall that the other fighter that they're kind of outworking him. I've seen that against Arnold Barboza. Now he showed a lot of heart and a lot of grit against guys like Maurice Hooker and Josh Taylor, but in recent years, Jose Ramirez, he just hasn't looked quite the same. And he, people are acting like Devin Haney, that his career is just completely over. Well, what about Jose Ramirez? He just ended up losing to a guy in Arnold Barboza, a guy that's never held a belt before, at least a legitimate belt. And, he pretty much lost like very thoroughly. Like it wasn't even like it was 8 rounds to 4. Like I think it was about like 9 rounds to 3, 10 rounds to 2.
You know what, man? I'm gonna be honest with you. I think Ramirez is gonna beat Haney.
Wow.
Like I think so. I really do think so, man. I think that's a bad fight for Haney. I think that's a perfect fight for Ramirez. Um, Ramirez. Look, when Ramirez is fighting at 144, he's gonna be stronger. Ramirez.
Right, but I heard this same shit. Like, I hear this same argument with people all the time whenever they make this argument. There's no offense against Arnold Barboza or Mikey Garcia. Now, Mikey Garcia, who was a very intelligent fighter when he was fighting, although, of course, I criticize him because I don't think he fought a lot of the bigger names. But Mikey Garcia, he recently ended up picking Jose Ramirez as well. But that's expected because they're working with Jose Ramirez. I believe that the Robert Garcia camp or the Garcias, they're working with Jose Ramirez. So, of course, you expect them to say that he's going to win. But even with Mikey Garcia and this dude right here, what I've noticed both times is that they say he's going to be stronger, he's going to be bigger, he has power, right? But they don't say anything in terms of what he's going to beat him in terms of skill or anything like that. Now, don't get it twisted. There are certain guys to where they break down a fight, like Canelo versus Crawford, for example, and certain people say, well, Canelo's very big and he's very powerful. That's why I think he's going to win. But the thing is with Canelo Alvarez is that Canelo was just about as skilled as Terrence Bud Crawford. That's what a lot of people overall don't realize, at least when they're both at their best. Now, I do think that Canelo is aged as a fighter, but of course, Crawford is a little bit aged as well, so we'll see how that goes. But the point being is this: I don't really see any points about how Jose Ramirez is going to beat Devin Haney off of skill. I just don't see it. And on top of that, I don't think that he's the right type of fighter to beat that of a Devin Haney. He's not particularly quick. He is very strong. He's powerful, but he's not particularly quick. He doesn't really move his head off the center line that well. He's a guy that, in my view, isn't the quickest of foot. He doesn't have the slowest feet that I've ever seen, but they're not very quick. He's a guy that, at times, once again, will kind of, lose confidence over the course of a fight if you show that you can get off on him early in terms of the jab and really start to outthrow him. And one thing I'll say about Devin Haney is this: he isn't the most skilled fighter that I've ever seen, although he's decently talented and skilled. But one thing he knows how to do is this: he knows how to, continue and how to keep the pace in the throw consistently. And I think that more than likely he's going to do that against Jose Ramirez. I think that, to be quite honest with you, that this is the perfect comeback fight for Devin Haney, because I think that he's going to look phenomenal here. But then on top of that, it's going to be, phrased in the, wow, he beat a former champion. When you take a look at these fights, other than maybe the Teofimo Lopez versus Arnold Barboza fights, many people may take a look at these fights as 50-50. This is what the majority of boxing cards are like. They try to phrase them as if they're quote-unquote 50-50, but really it's a fight that's more 70-30. That's pretty much what these fights are. They're really 70-30 fights that people are trying to disguise as 50-50 level fights. They're not.
Big dude. He's lengthy. He's big guy. He's very body strong, and then, who knows, like how Haney came out of that fight, I mean.
And of course, he's talking about the Ryan Garcia fight. And I do agree. It'll be very interesting to see how Devin Haney comes out of the Ryan Garcia fight. Now, of course, that fight, that win was recalled, of course, in Ryan Garcia's favor. But, or it was recalled from Ryan Garcia, as it should have been. But the thing is that I assure you, no matter how much trash the Haneys end up talking, Haney still considers that fight as a loss. Especially because I believe more than likely that anyone that snack program is probably on a little extra something as well. But anyway,
bro, he took a beating. Like his face was swollen. Ramirez, I beat him, but he didn't take a beating like Haney did.
right, but no offense against you, Arnold Barbosa, but you don't really have the all around talent of a Ryan Garcia. It's no offense. Now, that's not me stating that there are not certain things that he does better than a Ryan Garcia, because Ryan Garcia is a very flawed fighter. But Ryan Garcia, like, I really don't even know how to compare him. But he's one of those guys to where, like, he has a lot of faults within his style, but he's just so talented athletically to where it's like, you really got to watch out for him at all times. There are certain things that Arnold Barbosa or like other fighters like a Liam Paro, for example, like those two guys, there are certain areas to where they might be more skilled than a Ryan Garcia, but they're never going to beat him because Ryan Garcia is a guy that is skilled enough. And then on top of that, he's so skilled athletically to where it's like, or he's so talented athletically to where it basically doesn't even matter. It's almost like that, if we were to take a look at it, the UFC, like Paddy Pimblett very recently. Paddy Pimblett, he has a lot of faults within his style, but he's so talented athletically to where it's like sometimes it's not even going to matter. Now don't get it twisted. Paddy has really shown some major improvements with his skill, but sometimes, when you take a look at the balance, if you're skilled enough and then on top of that, you're a tremendous athlete, which Ryan Garcia is, he punches like a mule kicks, and then on top of that, his speed is up there. Ryan Garcia is a guy that more than likely, he would probably knock out Jose Ramirez, probably beat Arnold Barbosa, and also a lot of those other 140 pounders.
So who knows, man? I think it's a perfect fight for Ramirez. I think he beats Haney. I mean, that's my opinion. But we'll see. We'll see. That's just my opinion. And depends how ready he gets and how he's gonna be. Come fight. With the weight. So we'll see, man. But it's a good fight. I think Ryan knocks out Rolly.
As do I. If we were to talk about who, in my view, has the toughest fight, in my personal view, I would state that it's Teofimo Lopez versus Arnold Barbosa. Then after that, I would state that it would probably be Devin Haney versus Jose Ramirez, just because of the size. And then after that, I would say Ryan Garcia versus Rolly Romero. But in my view, Devin Haney, this is really a matchup that's made to look good, for him to look good. And for the storyline to be, he recovers well, over a former champion.
I honestly think that mine and Teal's fight is the best fight on the card. I think that there's more at stake.
Well, your fight definitely is supposed to be the most competitive, in terms of the best fight card. But, Arnold Barbosa, of course, is going to state that, I thought that we should have been the main event. And I understand that. But there's a reason why Ryan Garcia is the main event. Because Ryan Garcia is the guy that brings in the fans. It just is what it is. That's why when I reviewed certain videos, like, but from a lot of the LDBC and new media, they kept trying to state all this stuff about how Gervonta Tank Davis was clearly the new face of boxing because that Ryan Garcia fight, just happened because he had over 1 million pay-per-view buys. And I said, well, we have to wait on that a little bit. We have to see his next couple of fights because when you talk about, in comparison to Canelo's fighting guys like Munguia and Edgar Berlanga that, even though they're decently talented, maybe not all A-grade level fighters, but, he's still getting 550, 650 pay-per-view buys with that, 650,000 pay-per-view buys with that. When you talk about Gervonta Tank Davis, that Ryan Garcia fight was basically his version of Pacquiao versus Mayweather, and I don't know if there's ever going to be another opponent that's going to be as big for him in his career like that because Ryan Garcia has such an immense following. But what these idiots tried to claim is that, oh, well, are you saying, if Ryan Garcia is so popular, how come he can't do 1 million pay-per-view buys? Which makes no fucking sense because when has Gervonta Tank Davis done anywhere near 1 million pay-per-view buys? Or even 500,000 pay-per-view buys that Ryan Garcia? It's never happened. So once again, you have to watch out for that. But Ryan Garcia, even though he's never been a champion, he's a guy that, his name, and his face, it brings in a lot of people.
On our fight, because we're fighting for the WBO and the ring, I felt like ours should have been the main event. But like I said, I think we got on the card late, so the card is set. But
you would have not been the main event anyways, bro. It is what it is.
Hey, it's a good appetizer for the other fights.
No, for sure. And
it's no offense against Arnold Barbosa either. it is what it is. But he's never going to have the same appeal as a Devin Haney or a Ryan Garcia or a Teofimo Lopez. Sometimes there's just an appeal that you have as a fighter, whether it be charisma, looks, or your fighting style, or a certain, category that you kind of fit into that is going to build up your fan base. When you talk about Teofimo Lopez, of course, he's the brash New York Latino guy that, of course, his father is just as brash, and he kind of builds up from that, the very powerful, slick Latino fighter, almost kind of like a Danny Garcia. He reminds me a lot of that. Ryan Garcia, of course, is almost like the newer version of Oscar De La Hoya. Not as talented or as skilled in my personal view, of course, but, in terms of the looks and the power and the athleticism, that's pretty much what they kind of, try to label him as almost, pretty much the new pretty boy. When you talk about Devin Haney, of course, he's one of the slicker, greater up and coming, undefeated black American fighters that can fall within that category. They all kind of have their own niche. Arnold Barboza doesn't really have his own niche. He's a guy that, I believe has Mexican descent, but he's not a guy that, is really known for anything in particular. He's a very, talented fighter, but he's not a guy that in my view is ever going to have the appeal of any of those guys. When you talk about having, that appeal, you have to fit within a certain demographic. And on top of that, you have to have your own niche. When you talk about Canelo Alvarez, for example, he fits within a multitude of niches. That's why Canelo Alvarez is the biggest star of this current era, of probably the past 10 years. Because Canelo Alvarez, not only is he Mexican, but on top of that, he's a Caucasian Hispanic, so he can kind of fit with both the Latino, and the Caucasian fan bases. He also has a certain black, and black fan base as well. So, I mean, Canelo Alvarez has a very big following there. On top of that, Canelo Alvarez has a great resume. He's a guy that, overall, he's attracted to a certain amount of women fans as well because of his looks and a certain amount of other things. Canelo has a multitude of niches, So, once again, you kind of have to fit in a certain category.
What you had mentioned about Ramirez was like, I think a lot of people are kind of saying that, you made the fight look really easy when you fought Ramirez, but, styles make fights, and Devin's going to have to go in there and create an opportunity for himself. And you had your moments with Rolly, I believe, out in Vegas too. So it's clear that the presser's more than just Tio. I'm sure when you and Rolly bump into each other, it's on site too, right?
Oh man, it's crazy because we're all getting.
Rolly Romero, it's so funny how some of these Gervonta Tank Davis fans, how they try to bump up Rolly Romero, like this dude was some A-grade level fighter. All Rolly Romero is basically like another Paulie Malignaggi or another Chael Sonnen, one of these guys that, ends up talking shit for their whole entire career, and then they never end up winning any of the big fights in their career. That's all Rolly Romero is. He's pretty much like a lesser version of those guys.
Like me, Rolly, probably be sitting on the same, probably be sitting next to each other, bro. It's fucking crazy. Because we're all like, I guess like meet our meters.
Because if Rolly Romero got in the ring with Arnold Barboza, Jose Ramirez, any of these guys, I don't think anyone would favor Rolly Romero in any one of those fights. I don't know if Rolly Romero would be favored against any legitimate A-grade level fighter on the planet, and he would even lose to certain B-grade level fighters. That's how you know a fighter is not an A-grade level fighter, when you don't even personally believe that they can beat one A-grade level fighter. There's not one A-grade level fighter of similar size that Rolly Romero would end up beating.
We're the underdogs, right? So we're all going to be sitting together. And then those dudes over there are going to be sitting over there, So, man, I mean, look, at the end of the day, me and Rolly can get it on after, but, I'm rooting for him just because he's the underdog like me, I won't start no shit, at the presser unless he does, but, I'm going to tell him, hey, look, bro, I'm rooting for you, but at the same time, F you, but,
Are you really rooting for Rolly Romero because he's the underdog, bro, or are you also rooting for Rolly Romero because either A, you have a little bit of a dislike for Ryan Garcia, maybe even a little bit of jealousy, or on top of that, if I had to guess, you realize that if Rolly ends up beating Ryan Garcia, and if you get in the ring with Rolly, you understand that Rolly Romero would be clearly the easier assignment.
Rooting for you, bro.
If you beat Rolly, of course, you'd be known as the guy that beat Ryan Garcia.
On this one, So
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think for people who don't really understand, like if they just look at pure names like Ryan, Devin, and Tio. On the other side, I think boxing fans have realized that there's this three legit live, what you said, like underdogs. Like Tank told me.
Well, once again, that's that's what they're trying to say. But Rolly Romero, I mean, let's be real. He's a guy that just has a very poor boxing ability. He's also a guy that keeps his chin wide open in the air. He has very little boxing ability. He punches like a mule kicks, no doubt about it. Now, apparently, even Gervonta Tank Davis recently stated that he thought that Rolly hit harder than Ryan Garcia. But is it really going to matter once Ryan Garcia hits Rolly? Is he really going to be able to sustain the damage? I mean, I think Rolly has a decent chin. Now, of course, he was knocked out against Gervonta with one shot, pretty much. But I mean, no one's really surprised at that because Gervonta, punches very hard. He's debatably the hardest hitter, out of any championship level fighter today, other than maybe Inoue and Artebet. So I mean, it is what it is. But you took a lot of punishment against Isaac Pitbull Cruz, someone that also has great power. But Ryan Garcia's punching power is just on a whole nother level. On top of that, he's also very tall and lengthy for that weight class.
Rolly hits harder than Ryan. Like he hits harder than Ryan.
That's what Gervonta Tank Davis said.
And then you made it easy against Ramirez, but you said he's beating Devin. And there's a lot of people that's looking at you as the upset Tio. Your competition's been.
Well, you're hoping that Jose Ramirez also beats Devin Haney once again because you know that would make you look good. But, do I believe that this guy actually believes that Jose Ramirez will beat Devin? I don't know. It's possible because it's not like Devin Haney isn't coming off of a very bad performance over Ryan Garcia, but I mean, we'll see.
And top notch, where some people kind of question Tio's performances recently. So maybe it's 3-0 underdogs, right? And then the whole card and the whole.
I highly doubt it. I would be very surprised, to be quite honest with you, if any of the underdogs ended up pulling off the upset. Now, who do I think has the greatest chance to pull off the upset? It would be this man right here, Arnold Barboza, just because Tio has shown so many holes in his game, and Arnold Barboza is a competent boxer. But, I have, all the favorites in this fight, all the A-grade level names, comfortably as favorites in this fight. I believe that Devin Haney will win by decision over Jose Ramirez. I believe that Teofimo Lopez will also win by decision, and I believe that Ryan Garcia will win by knockout.
Boxing world shook up just like that.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too, man, because if you look at it, okay, Leo beat Loma that had a messed up shoulder. Leo beat Josh Taylor that was, for sure injured. You could tell on the fight. Like, he was not the... I think the best Josh Taylor was against Ramirez.
Well, Vasily Lomachenko said that he had an injured shoulder against Teofimo Lopez, but it's no offense, but I'm getting tired of these fighters using excuses in some of the bigger fights in their career. And apparently you say that heading into the fight you had a shoulder injury or something else like that. I mean, listen, Vasily Lomachenko has had shoulder injuries in the past. He ripped and dislocated his shoulder, I believe, against Roy Linares in that fight. So it's not like he hasn't had shoulder injuries in the past. Maybe it's possible that something else popped back up. But in my personal view, it's just an excuse. It is what it is. It's whatever. I think Lomachenko knew that he was clearly undersized for Teofimo Lopez, and that Lopez had one-shot knockout power. I think that he was hoping that Lopez was going to tire out in the second half of the fight. It didn't happen, and he just didn't do shit for the first half of the fight. You can't win a fight that way. So Lomachenko, he's just going to have to eat that L. It is what it is. And when you talk about Josh Taylor, what I will state is this. Josh Taylor, in my view, was not quite the same after he took that layoff. I seen that against Jack Catterall and also against Teofimo Lopez. Now, he still was probably top 10 pound for pound when Teo had defeated him, but he just wasn't quite the same in my view. But still an A-grade level name.
Other than that, who's Teo beat, like that you can say like, oh yeah, it's like a really big name, He's been, kind of fighting these guys the past like 2 years, because super champion status that he can just, fight whoever he wants, So we'll see, man.
Well, what I'll give Teofimo Lopez credit for is this. He's fought a lot of the guys that would be a thorn in people's side that you really would not want to fight, like Jermaine Ortiz and Sandor Martin and certain guys like that. I mean, how many people would actually really want to fight those guys? Because those are losable fights if you don't have the perfect fight. Sandor Martin is a very dangerous opponent. He's very slick. He's very quick. He, of course, was able to catch Mikey Garcia off guard and give him the second loss of his career, which, of course, was one of the bigger upsets that I had ever seen personally. And, of course, with Jermaine Ortiz, many people believe that he potentially beat Lomachenko, and I thought that Lomachenko had just won that fight 7 rounds to 5, but it was still very competitive.
I think that, Teal's overlooking me, and I think that just like Catterall did, just like everyone else does, and it's a mistake, especially.
Well, it would be a huge mistake for Teal to overlook you, but, I'd have to see, but I don't think that Teofimo Lopez is overlooking you. He'd have to be a fool to overlook you, someone that, is someone that just beat Jack Catterall and Jose Ramirez. And then on top of that, Teal kind of lost a fight in his career because he overlooked someone, and that was George Kambosos. At least that's my personal view of it. I have no doubt in my mind that Teofimo Lopez, that some of his faults came out in that fight, but I also believe that he overlooked George Kambosos a bit.
Right now, so the way I train, man, the way I work, I'm not the biggest, fastest, strongest, but I guarantee you I outwork everybody. That's a fact. So that's what got me here, and that's what I'm gonna continue to do. So man, I can't wait. Come May 2nd. It's gonna be Barbosa versus everybody, Golden Boy versus everybody. Golden Boy versus Top Rank is gonna be spectacular, man. Can't wait.
But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I just thought that was very particularly interesting. We'll see overall if Arnold Barbosa, can put his money where his mouth is. We'll see. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Do I personally believe that Devin Haney will lose to Jose Ramirez? No, I do not. I personally have all the A-grade level fighters or all the A-side fighters as favorites in this fight, but we'll see. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.